Hello, Kathryn Taylor here, and I'm the author of the book behind me, the poster for it, Misty's Misadventures, and I'm also the host, creator, producer of my show, Let's Get Writing, which comes on Facebook. And we also share them on Kathryn Taylor TV on YouTube. So I've been busy learning about writing and wanting to share writing. So what I have been doing is reading some of my book. And Little Miss Princess Peach here, my little poodly girl, she is my official audience. And if she falls asleep, it's no reflection on the book. Absolutely not. And her daddy is over in the next chair, Mr. Salty, and he is sleeping. So I hope you don't sleep. Anyway, last episode number 1, I read chapter 1 and introduced you to my main character, Misty Muldoon. And that's a kind of a representation of her behind me. She's a young mom and around 30 years old with 2 kids, dealing with divorce, a failed business, like nothing has gone all that well. And so she's picked up the pieces and is moving back to her roots, which happens to be Newfoundland. And her old and great uncle who had passed away left her a house. So she's hoping it's not going to be too bad. Anyway, in this chapter, we're going to see a little bit about that arrival. And one thing that I've always done with my chapters when I was starting to write and I felt it would help me, I named the chapters so that I almost had a theme as I was writing them. So the first one was Homecoming Queen, and which she was or is, but not exactly in the sense that you'd want to be as a homecoming queen. And a little irony in that. And this one is called Smooth Operator. And who does that refer to? I think you'll meet a smooth operator in this chapter. I'm not going to say any more than that. I think we've all met smooth operators at some point in our lives. Anyway, they're everywhere. They're even in Charlie's Cove. So I'm going to read a little bit of probably the chapter and give you a flavor for it. And then at the end, I've got some things I'll share with you about Newfoundland that I think you'll enjoy. There's always a possibility I could break out in the middle of this reading. You never know what I'm going to do. But mostly I want to entertain you. So what do you think, Princess? Are we ready to read? Are you ready to listen? What do you think? Rub you? Scratch you? Okay. I'll be working with one hand. Okay, Smooth Operator. Excuse me, Misty called through her lowered window to an older man on the side of the road. His plaid jacket, green work pants, and rubber boots seemed like they had all been well used for a number of years, particularly the man himself. There was nothing about him that inspired confidence other than the fact she felt assured he was local and she needed directions. Excuse me, can you tell me where Charlie Cuthbertson's place is? Charlie Cuthbertson's place. I'm looking for it, she repeated. Oh, well, try the cemetery. He's in with the Presbyterians. There only be a few of them, but you can't miss old Cuthbertson. Got a deal on the market for Mount Ferguson when the chick bounced. You know, we just ignore the fact that Mount Ferguson's name is on it too. Misty deadpanned. She thought she'd understood what he said, but it was touch and go. She hadn't heard anyone talk that fast since a long time. Okay, she tried again. Okay, not Charlie, his place, his house. Oh, he wants his house. Oh, yeah, we're going in the wrong direction for that. He pointed a few hundred yards away. What you wants is back there, eh? Third road on your left. Can't miss it by. Great. Thanks very much. She started to close the window and stopped as the man continued to speak. Duff Murphy is me. What do you want with the old Cuthbertson's place? He rested his hand on the car door and leaned forward. Misty figured he was entitled to be curious. Pleased to meet you, Duff. She stuck her hand out the window and was pleasantly surprised by his warm grip. I'm Charlie's niece, great niece, Misty Muldoon. We're going to spend a little bit of time here. She still hadn't come to terms with the phrase. Moving in. Mom, you didn't tell me he died. I'm not staying in some dead man's house, Liberty yelled over the seat. Misty smiled at Duff and raised her voice, hoping to smother her daughter's protests. Oh, well, thanks for your help. See you around, she waved politely. She raised the car window again, this way, this time all the way up. Turning while glaring at a child in the back seat. Turning a car while glaring at a child in the back seat was not the easiest of maneuvers, but since the onset of this trip, Misty was getting rather good at it. Most of us moms will know about how to do that. A few minutes later, she pulled up in front of the house at the end of the third driveway. Oh, surely this couldn't be the place. Visions of a brightly painted outport home fizzled as she stared at the deteriorating monstrosity before her. She understood now why no one ever visited him. Let's get out, she said rather half-heartedly, honestly hoping the key wouldn't fit. It could be the wrong place. What had her life come to? It was unbearable to think they'd be living here. But as much as she wanted to refute it in her heart of hearts, she knew this was indeed Great Uncle Charlie's castle, and now their new home. Oh, Vivi's gonna sleep in a dead man's room, Liberty jeered at her sister, who ran to her mother in tears. Oh, this is it, thought Misty. This is my breaking point. With one sobbing daughter in her arms and the other tagging behind, Misty walked up to the front door and tried the key. When it turned, she pressed her face into Vivi's sweater and hoped her own tears would go unnoticed. The house was shockingly cold and dark. Vivian slipped from her arms and stood by her side. Misty quickly wiped her eyes. Her crying would have to come later, given the feeling of despair gripping her heart. She had no doubt it would. But feeling slightly more composed, she tried the light switch and was surprised when it worked. Well, at least that was going their way. Liberty peeked around her and sized up the room. Well, what's that? She asked, pointing to a large black stove with a glass door. Oh, that, my darling daughter, is what's known as a wood stove. Lots of these old houses have them. You know, we can paint it and use it as a planter. I hope, she added under her breath. Not exactly the Ritz-Carlton, is it? Oh, a deep voice carried across the room. Misty screamed and grabbed her daughters. She was shaking visibly as she turned, almost expecting to see Charlie's ghost. Sorry, didn't mean to scare you. A tall, angular man stood in the doorway. I'm Hayward Hedges. Duff told me you'd arrived. Like, that's how the grapevine works in small communities. Whoever you see tells someone who tells someone who tells someone who tells someone. Have ever lived in a place like that? I have kind of. Anyway. Hedges had been Misty's only contact with Charlie's Cove. He was her great-uncle's lawyer and had been the one to track her down after Charlie had died and left the property to her. It was the strangest thing, really. Misty had never been to Charlie's house, much less to Charlie's Cove, and her great-uncle had been a reclusive man, and what she could remember of him wasn't flattering. He had been cranky and not much fun. And this house pretty much summed up her first impression of him when he had once visited her mother. Decrepit, gray, and humorless. But at least it was a refuge from the storm that encompassed her life at the moment, and for that much she should be grateful. After all, a single woman, recently unemployed with 2 kids, and only enough money in the bank for the next 2 weeks, might consider herself lucky to have a house. The aesthetics could be taken care of later. She shrugged off the slight feeling of unease that Hedges' abrupt appearance had stirred up and offered her hand, as well as a smile. Oh, Mr. Hedges, you caught us off guard, but I'm glad you're here. Maybe you can show us around. I mean, it's strange coming into a house we don't know at all. And this one in particular, your great uncle didn't part too easily with his money. I can see that. He wasn't too bad of a feller. We were all used to him around here. Well, even kept an eye on him, though he much preferred we left him alone. You knows the way it is, eh? Well, once people finds out that old Charlie's niece has moved in, you're likely to get plenty of visitors yourself. Everyone around here wants to help as long as you don't mind him knowing your business. Hayward stared at her with a suggestive smile that never reached his eyes. You still looks pale. Guess I really shook you up. Well, I'm a bit tired from the trip, and honestly, she said as she spread her hands despondently, I was hoping the place might be in better shape. She glanced at Hayward's hand and noticed he was wearing a wedding band. Still, she hesitated. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, but her sixth sense was vibrating. It wouldn't hurt to let him know she had no intention of being the hot new piece in town. She knew a great way to start. Let me introduce you to my daughters, Vivian and Liberty. Say hello to Mr. Hedges, girls. Well, Vivian and Liberty, very pretty names for two very pretty girls, said Hedges. Oh, Dad said she got carried away. For a 7-year-old, Liberty had a surprising command of the English language, particularly in the sense that Misty never knew what she was going to say. How's that, dear? Asked Hedges. Oh, our initials spell something. They do? Oh, Liberty, Mr. Hedges doesn't want to hear about that, interjected Misty, hoping to get her daughter off the topic. Oh, nope, I do, said Hedges, appearing intrigued by the young girl. La vie, the life. Mom named us after that, see? I'm Liberty Alexis, and my sister is Vivian Isabel Eugenie. Get it? Got it, Hedges replied after a short pause. Well, that must have been an interesting period in your life, Mrs. Muldoon. Not everyone thinks of that kind of thing. He leaned against the door jamb and allowed his eyes to wander briefly from her face. Misty shifted uncomfortably under his scrutiny. Look, I'm in creative, she replied as she pulled Liberty and Vivian closer. Public relations, advertising, media, that kind of thing. We think of stuff like that. Not much around here in that line of work, except maybe at our local paper. You are planning to work, are you? Well, if we're planning to eat, yes. Hedges sized her up again. Money's tight, eh? I'm recently divorced, she replied, wondering how she, the master of Q&A, had let the conversation drift into such a personal area. I had to close my business rather unexpectedly. Oh, it's called bankruptcy, I'm sure a term as a lawyer you're familiar with. Well, I've a feeling you'll make out all right here in Charlie's Cove. Things is a way of working out here. Hedges was still standing in the front porch, neither in nor out, and Misty sensed he wanted a direct invitation to cross the threshold. She weighed the pros and cons of inviting him in, but her unfamiliarity with the old house won out against her better judgment. Oh, how about the official tour, she asked, as she turned to move aside. She adjusted the zipper on her jacket all the way up, uncomfortably aware of the cropped jeans that hung low on her hips. For once, Misty wished she'd worn her oldest pair of baggy sweats. And while you're at it, can you assure Vivian that great Uncle C didn't die in this house? Scared of a few ghosts, are you? Not to worry, this place isn't haunted. Charlie died down at the wharf. He just up and keeled over, which beats other alternatives when you're 95 years old. How old might you be, Mrs. Muldoon? Oh, old enough to know better, thought Misty as she and the girls followed him across the threshold into the kitchen. Oh, so much for listening to my intuition. Mom's 30, said Liberty. I'm almost 8. How old are you? Misty gave her daughter a threatening look and shook her head in warning. And I'm telling you, one little aside, if you're a mother, you're probably familiar with that technique, like, no. And kids have that way of going, Anyway, on with the show. Ah, living up to your name, aren't you, dear? Said Hedges. He was speaking to Liberty, but continued to look at Misty in a way that made her skin crawl. I'm a little older than your mother, young lady, but a lot younger than your great uncle. He winked at Misty as though they were sharing an intimate joke. Mr. Hedges, Misty began, wanting to change the subject before it became even more personal. How had he managed to manipulate the conversation so easy? Smooth wasn't the word to describe him. Creepy would be better. Now, Mrs. Muldoon, Hedges interrupted. We're pretty informal here in the Cove, especially since we're all friends. I'm just plain old Hayward. Well, Hayward, she said with forced cheerfulness, how about that tour then? Her grin had settled into what she felt certain looked more like a grimace. Oh, I gotta get this guy the hell out of here. A few words, the tour, and the bum's rush. Were you born here in the Cove? She asked, as if I cared, for God's sake. If the living room had been a shocker, the kitchen was what you would call a total meltdown. The old linoleum floor was lifting at the edges, and the color scheme was non-existent. From the stains behind the sink and on the counters, the place hadn't had much loving care in years. God, there's such a thing as pinching pennies, but how could he have lived like this? She thought. She had no idea how she would do it, but they weren't going to live in a place that felt so abandoned. Somehow she would have to fix it up. The rest of the tour was just as disappointing, no matter the cost. The first things they were buying were new beds, and until then they would camp out on the floor. She shivered, but wasn't sure if it was from the dampness or the thought of insects and rodents. Hayward, where's the furnace? In the front room. Front room? Misty was puzzled, like, I'm not sure I understand. Oh, Charlie didn't have a furnace, he continued. He used the wood stove in the living room. Like I said, he didn't part with his money very easily, and I expect you can manage until you get a furnace put in. I know today's a bit chilly, but the weather will improve. It's only June yet. Oh, the chill in Misty's heart far outweighed the temperature in the house. One of the boxes in her car was filled with bills from her failed PR company. And now she had to buy a furnace? Did Uncle Charlie happen to leave any money? She asked. She didn't care what impression her question left with Hayward. Uncle C's place was an obvious money pit, and quelling the panic that was building in her stomach would require more than a pep talk. It would take real hard cash. Well, not as far as I know. He prepaid my services and did the same for his funeral. If you ask the locals, they'll say Charlie had pots of money, all buried up here somewhere, but it wouldn't hurt to turn over any loose floorboards you come across, what? Misty could hear the wheels churning. The House of Horrors had morphed into Treasure Island for her two daughters. At least it might keep them busy while she undertook what was going to be a monumental cleaning job. Just the thought of what lay ahead of her made her want to lie down and sleep. Well, we'll keep that in mind, she said as she led him directly to the front door. Thanks for the tour. At least we know there are no ghosts hiding behind the doors. Despite the cool breeze that whirled around them, Misty held the door wide open. Time to go, buddy boy, and don't come back anytime soon. I think we've all met people like that. Well, no need for you girls to ever feel uneasy or lonely, eh? He winked at Misty again. You can always give old Hayward the call. Oh God, subtlety was obviously an art that had bypassed Hayward, but his comment did serve one purpose. She needed to get a phone installed, and soon. She wanted a fast link to the outside world, especially if Hayward was a sample of the local hormone pool. Relieved to finally shut the door, she turned and looked at her daughter, standing uneasily in the gloomy room. Oh, we're so alone here. I'm just not sure anymore. She thought, what if I made a terrible mistake? She felt her eyes filling with moisture again. Hey, what's the matter, Mom? Asked Liberty. Nothing, honey. All this dust is just making my allergies act up. Come here, you two, and give me a hug. She wrapped her arms around her daughters and squeezed them tightly. She wasn't looking forward to their first night in the house, but her more immediate problem was figuring out how to work a wood stove. If it had been anyone other than Hayward, she would have asked for help. Anyway, they couldn't possibly freeze in June. At least, she hoped they couldn't. End of chapter 2. Okay, guys, for those of you who are not from here, this is not going to clear some of the fur out of my face. What do you think, Princess? Still asleep? No? For any of you who are not from Newfoundland, you have to understand that our springs are almost non-existent. And the weather is unpredictable, shall we say. Because here we are in the North Atlantic, so the icebergs are coming down from the north, and they can bring kind of strange things with them. And I don't understand ocean currents and things like that. Not like the weatherman, is that Eddie Shear? Anyway, it can cause our weather just to be like hot one day and then the next day like cool. Possibly snowy, even in June. Yes, I did say that. Anyway, at the time, why this is meaningful, I was at university over at Acadia in Nova Scotia. And we'd be writing exams in April, wearing shorts, t-shirts in the valley of Nova Scotia. It can be super hot that time of year. I mean, they grow grapes there, they make wine. So anyway, you know, you pack up, you come home to Newfoundland, and God, you get here, I don't know, somewhere around the 20th of April or something like that, depending on your exams. And like, it could be like freezing. It could be just like, God, put on the winter jacket again. So I used to get disgusted with it. It's like, I'm never coming home here again. But, you know, we'd all get home from university and we'd all see our friends who were perhaps here or coming back home. And once you get into the routine, you'd have fun. And, but it is one of the things about Newfoundland that you should know. I mean, the weather can be unusual at times, and it can be super nice too. And if you have never been on an iceberg, well, not on an iceberg, but near an iceberg, I have, and many people do it as tourists, but many people here do it. So we take our boats out end of June or July. The bergs are still here, and we'll have our swimsuits on, and as you get in closer to the bergs, like you feel the temperature drop. Seriously, like it gets cool. But it's stunningly beautiful. The colors in the icebergs are beautiful, and the way the sun can reflect off of them. And what we do, we take pictures, of course, and I'm going to pop some in underneath, but we also have what's called a gaff. And the gaff is like this long, dangerous looking thing with a big hook in the end. So when there are bergy bits, we can hook onto them and we bring them in, and then we keep them and we put them in our drinks, because bergy bits and iceberg ice, as we call it, doesn't melt. Like, it's so compact. So God knows what we're taking in. Like, we're probably taking in like organisms from, I don't know. I don't even want to think about that, but we do put it mostly in alcohol, so that probably balances it out. I haven't died yet, and no, as far as I know, no one else has either. So we do that. That's one of the cool things, and you'll have to check it out sometime if you come to Newfoundland. The bergs come in June, and you can have tours and things. It's really fun. And some of the other things we did growing up here, we have some great waterfalls around the area. We did a lot of swimming in these local watering holes. One of them was called Leech's Brook. We grew up with it. Okay, I know. Worst name ever. And poor Misty, she's in PR and marketing. I tell you, she would not have recommended that name. And now they're trying to switch it to Thunderbrook, but all of us who grew up here, we don't switch it. It's still Leech's. And I'm going to put a photograph of that there too, because you'll love it. And this summer I hiked the Sir Alexander Murray hiking trail in Kings Point. The waterfall there is like gorgeous. I didn't go in it, but my daughters did. They were with me. and it's cold. The water was really cold, so that had a little bit of iceberg quality to it, and I'll add a photograph. But you know what? The waterfall almost reminded me of what you would see in Hawaii. Like it just cascaded down over rock, and it was beautiful. So while I'm reading, I'm going to share little bits of Newfoundland and stories to bring further entertainment and enticement to the process of revealing Misty. So let me know if you like her as a person. I do. I love Misty, and I'm always thinking of different things that could be happening to her and things that she could do. So you got to tune in next time to see what happens further with the house. And here's again the cover. Let me know how you're enjoying this, and if you have questions, feel free to post them. I hope that you'll be back for chapter 3. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, and it's been my pleasure because this is what I love to do, tell stories and share my characters with you. Bye now. Oh, wait now. I'm not going to say goodbye. I'm going to say, go check out my webpage and like and share. If you enjoyed this, like and share it. Leave a comment. I'm on Facebook, Kathryn Taylor Media, and a lot of the interviews I do with authors, they are on that page, but also on YouTube at Kathryn Taylor TV. Gosh, you know, I'm the worst person for someone in marketing and PR. I forget these things. Have a great day. Much love to you all, and we'll see you again soon for chapter 3. Bye.